All right, I guess we will kick off. I want to welcome everyone just for coming. I know some of us in different places of the earth right now. I know that snow is crazy. I'm seeing a wonderful amount of participants. I don't know who has power. I don't know who does all that stuff. So a couple of things I want to just introduce, myself for all. I think most of you know me at this point, but Ben Lastrom, the Director of College Placement, and I'm co-hosting this with my colleague in College Placement, Tom Filato. So you'll see, Tom, you can give a wave just to everybody. What I would ask is just everybody please stay muted for the entire time. We will tape this, and the idea is once it's taped and edited, I'll send it around to all of our students and families. You'll get it through the portal. You are totally fine having cameras on if you would like, if you're comfortable with that. If you like your cameras off, totally fine. Just know that it will be taped and just distributed internally. For our panelists, if you could keep your cameras on the whole time, that would be awesome, because you're going to be, the faces that'll be doing a lot of the talking. Just a quick plug before we get to kind of the objectives and introduce our panelists. We've been rolling with introductory meetings for the class of 2022. So if you are one of the 66 and growing participants on this and you haven't had your meeting yet, it's very simple. You'll just schedule it with your college counselor. We'll get kicked off and we'll go from there. So for this program tonight, what is the objective? We want to have a particular emphasis on Seton Hall Prep tonight. Okay. We want to have, for all of you on here, an insight into how decisions are made. So we have the experts here. All right. A lot of them are going to be able to tell you what, prestigious colleges and universities look for, how decisions are made. And I'm going to ask if they could kind of keep an eye and a particular eye on prep students. The other thing is you'll get a better working knowledge of just the admissions process, from the other side of the desk, and kind of how they're, working with us in college placement and how they're making those decisions. Okay. So the structure of the event, traditionally, I'll just present and it'll be spring items, and then I'll roll into a shorter panel. But we had some of my favorite people on this panel. I was really pumped. Everybody was like, oh yeah, it's virtual. Yes, 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 yes. So I was like, oh, that's great. So I'm giving them the floor because I truly respect all of them, greatly. And I'm so interested to hear the questions that they answer and how they answer them. So we'll have a panel format. What we will do is after introductions, I will have, everyone is welcome to ask a question into the chat. Okay, so there'll be nothing that'll be, face to face. We will try to get to, as many questions as possible, before we have to, cut it out. But, please put your questions, try to make them as clear as possible in the chat. If it is just for everybody, you can just ask the question. If by chance it's just for one of the specific college admissions reps, please put the question and then maybe in parentheses, put the actual university or institute. Okay. As I said, we'll try to get as many as possible. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, introduce, our panelists. All right. I'm going to go through. And then after that, once I'm finished introducing them, I'm going to have them just give a 1-minute description. I have to say 1 minute because these are all passionate people in representing them. So it's going to be 1 minute of description just of, the university you represent. And I'll ask you just to kind of give a scope of, your experience working with Seton Hall Prep in the past, just quickly in terms of, okay, I've been here, worked with them, done this, done that, because I've worked with you, we've all worked with you for quite a bit. And then after that, what we'll do is we will roll into questions. So I'm going to ask you guys if you could to just give a wave because they can all see you now. All right. So I'm going to introduce kind of in, I guess, alphabetical. So we have David Koskowski on here, who's the Dean of Admissions at Clemson University. We have Matthew Morano, who's the Associate Dean of Admission at Providence College. Emily Oplaka, who's the Assistant Director of Admission at the University of Notre Dame. Jackie Williams, who's the Dean of Admission at Stevens Institute of Technology. And Jessica Schaffner, who's the Assistant Director of Admissions at Syracuse University. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it. I will kind of turn it over one by one in that order. So I guess, David can go first and then, Matt and everyone. So just give kind of a 1 minute description and yeah, go for it. All right, David, you're up.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. Hi, Ben and Tom. It's good to see you too. Clemson University is 26,000 total students enrolled. 20,000 of those are undergraduates. We are in the northwest corner of South Carolina. We are as far away from the ocean as you can be and still be in South Carolina. Selective, competitive, passionate students, faculty, and staff. No one accidentally gets to Clemson, so when you get there, you fall in love with it. And I think I kept it under a minute.
And David, if you could just kind of explain just in terms of how many years you've worked with us at the prep and
so Ben is one of my favorite folks. I spent about 15 years at Penn State, so I know the Northeast very well and have visited Seton Hall Prep from both institutions. So I went to a private all-boys Catholic high school. So when I go there, it seems like home, and I'm pretty upset that I haven't been there in a year and a half. So
great. Thanks, David. All right, Matt, you're up.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. My name is Matt Morano. As Ben said, I am an Associate Dean of Admission at Providence College. So PC is a small Catholic liberal arts school located right outside downtown Providence. We're right around 4,000 students. So it's that nice balance of the big school atmosphere, but the small community feel. And I think what's really attractive to our students is the fact that they have that blend of being a D1 sports university. So they get that big school atmosphere when it comes to athletics, but also the small academic experience as well. And the fact that we're right outside of a downtown capital city means that things like internships and job shadowing and practical experience is very easily attainable for our students. We're also the only college in the country that was founded and is still run by Dominican friars. So that's kind of our claim to fame and what makes us unique. Although our last college president is now the college president at St. John's. So we're just kind of like slowly assimilating other Big East schools, and it's going to work out pretty nicely. I've been working with Ben at Seton Hall Prep for, I think it's 8 years now. Ben, does that sound right? Like 8 or 9 years.
And I remember even seeing you on the road. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fast how quickly this happens. But yeah, thanks, Ben, for putting this together. And I look forward to hearing from all of you tonight.
Great. All right, Emily.
Yeah, hi. So I am a Notre Dame grad and have been back at Notre Dame for 3 years. So I'm excited to talk to you about my alma mater. I have worked with Ben for 3 years. I've worked with New Jersey for the whole time that I've been back in the office, and I'm originally from South Louisiana, but I've definitely adopted New Jersey as a home for me. I spent a lot of time thinking about New Jersey. I'm sure everybody on this panel feels that way. A little bit about Notre Dame. We do have about 12,000 students total with about 8,600 undergrads. So mostly an undergrad focused campus with a lot of research opportunities as well as D1 sports, most notably football, obviously, but we do have really strong sports across all of our athletic department, which is a really fun experience for our students on campus and a big part of student life. It's a very residential campus. It is a Catholic university in the Holy Cross tradition. So a lot of big parts of the student experience, and I'll be brief, so I'll stop there.
Thanks, Emily. Jackie.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Lambs. I'm the Dean of Admission at Stevens Institute of Technology, located in Hoboken, New Jersey, not too far from you all. And of course, right across the river from Manhattan. So our location plays a large role in our internship, co-op, and job placement rates. Stevens is known for our programs in sciences, computer science, engineering. We also have our School of Business and our College of Arts and Letters, which features programs in music and technology and visual arts and technology. Stevens is smaller also, around 4,000 undergraduates. If you've been to campus recently or if you haven't, I highly recommend that you go check it out. We have a great project going on right now. We are building 2 brand new residence halls where we're going to house almost 1,000 undergraduate students on campus. It's absolutely beautiful. If you haven't gone or just check out the website, it's definitely worth seeing. but I'm looking forward to working with you all tonight. And I've been working with Ben for quite some time. I've been in this role at Stevens for a little over 5 years, but I've been in college admissions for about 16 years, and I've known Ben for almost all of that time. So we've been working together for a while, so it's great to be here.
Great. All right, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. Jessica Schaffner, again, Assistant Director with Syracuse University. I've been working with the university coming on my 6th year, which just sounds astounding. All 6 of those have been working with students from Seton Hall Prep. So I know you all quite well, your curriculum, and I've worked alongside Ben for that entire time. If you all did not know, Ben is an alumni of Syracuse. So
I didn't say it. You did. I didn't say it. You did.
Not only do I know quite a bit about you, but we talk about football every single time that I come to.
Sadly, we do. Yeah.
A little bit about Syracuse University. We are located in Syracuse, New York, which is about 4.5 hours from you. Syracuse University is a mid-sized university of about 15,000 undergraduate students. Those students are comprised of 10 different schools and colleges across the university, all located on one campus. We get that question quite a bit. Two of them, are going to be liberal arts based, while the other 8 are pre-professional. We're a very residential campus. About 70% of our students live on campus. Very well known for athletics. Our school spirit is always ranked pretty much within the top 5 across the country. So something that we are definitely well known for in terms of that student experience overall.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. All right. So I have to ask one question. All right. So I'm going to give you guys a softball to start. And then at this point, everyone can feel free to, certainly put it in the chat. You can definitely address it to just everyone so everyone can kind of see it and get, a glimpse. But I'm going to ask just a very simple question of how COVID-19 has affected your admissions process over the last year. Just a softball, All right. I guess I'll start. We'll do it. David, you could start, I guess. It's for everybody.
So with respect to the admissions process, the biggest impact at Clemson was becoming test optional for the current year. We have not determined whether that will be the case for the next year, but that really is the single biggest impact with respect to the admissions process. Obviously, we're not able to visit high schools or go to college fairs or see folks in person. We're also not accepting visitors on campus, but I would identify being test optional as the biggest impact in the decision-making process.
Great. And guys, we can keep the same order. If it's a question for all, I guess it would be David, Matt, Emily, Jackie, Jess. All right.
Yeah, sure thing. So I think at Providence, we were very nervous, many of my colleagues probably, about what the numbers were going to look like. And we anticipated that numbers might fall off a little bit just because people weren't necessarily going to be able to make it to campus in the same numbers that they have been. So we were actually surprised when we got the most applications in the school's history. Like, go figure, in a global pandemic, that applications continue to rise. And I feel like my colleagues might echo that sentiment. We've been hearing that at a lot of different places. And so I think for us, it's our biggest challenge has been reading these applications and doing justice to these students, especially when a lot of them have had really difficult ends to their senior year, and also the beginning, ends of their junior year, and now the start of their senior year, learning in very untraditional environments from what they're normally used to. We've always been test optional, so that's been relatively consistent for us. That never really played a huge impact for us. So I know that there were a lot of schools that are making that change now, but for us, it's largely the same review, but we are trying to read students and just, like I said, give them their due process and making sure that we make the best decision that we can.
Awesome. So a lot of what I have to say is probably the same as what everyone else is going to say. Definitely, we were well up in applications, so that makes it really difficult. It's always really hard to deny really great students, and I think this year it's even more so that way. So definitely not sure how that's going to look for later classes, but that definitely was an effect for us this year. A logistical change that may or may not be kept for next year is that the Common App and Coalition applications, which are what we accept for students, include a question saying, how has COVID affected you, or how has the pandemic affected you? And obviously there's a lot of ways that that might have affected you and your family, whether family health or your own health, or an activity that you were selected for or a part of that had to change in some way or some format. So all of those things can be captured in a lot of ways, but that question actually captures a lot of that information. And all of us read within the context of what you've been able to accomplish and whatever you've been a part of. And that's another way that we're able to get that context. So I would say that that's a big part of how things have changed in some way for this year.
Sure. So yeah, I echo everybody. Stevens also was test optional for the first time ever this year, and we also saw a significant increase in our applicant pool. So we are in the process now of, trying to admit the students, making the best decisions that we can possibly make under these new circumstances. We have not decided yet if we will be test optional again next year. Something else, though, is, of course, the demonstrated interest factor. Stevens does consider demonstrated interest as part of our applicant decision review. And so what we've actually seen is we've added a ton of virtual opportunities for our students to visit us or demonstrate interest without actually physically being able to come to campus. So as you're looking at schools and preparing in that way, just know, or something to ask them is whether or not they consider demonstrated interest and how they are considering demonstrated interest during this time. Again, we've pivoted and offer a ton of different virtual options for our students. We are accepting visitors, very, very few. It's very limited under safety guidelines and things of that nature. But again, we were able to pivot and really saw a nice increase in students virtually visiting Stevens, which was nice.
Great.
Sound a little bit like a broken record here because Syracuse also saw quite a significant amount of applications this year, similar to Matt, our highest ever on record. And it has made it a little bit challenging for our very competitive programs. As I said earlier, Syracuse has 10 different schools and colleges. I saw somebody put in the chat, what is your acceptance rate? I always hate that question because it's so misleading for us, because each school and college is vastly, vastly different in their acceptance rates. And so I would say the biggest thing that's really affecting us as we're reading, and this is something Emily kind of said as well, is that it is difficult to turn away students who in a traditional year would probably be an admit, probably make that cut. But this year, some of those competitive programs do have to be a little more competitive. I would also say something else that nobody has necessarily spoke about yet, is that we're also really looking at finances and being ethical in that as well. And so we're working really closely with our financial aid office to make sure, because Syracuse is a need-aware school. There's two different types of schools, need aware and need blind. And that does come into play for us. And what I mean by that is we want to be ethical in our decisions, that if students cannot afford to come to Syracuse, that we are looking at that as well. Now, that's not something that we look at our first read or our second read even, but it is something that does come into a larger play with more applicants overall. Syracuse did become test optional for both this year, and we made an announcement that we will be test optional for the following year as well. I do think that moving forward, because I'm going to assume most people here are juniors or families of juniors and in that area. So know that what we're speaking about right now, it will continue to affect you next year. Already about 1,800 schools have gone test optional for at least next year, if not 2 years. So know that a lot of the things that we're going to talk about this year in terms of COVID, even if COVID goes away for next year, which who knows at this point, a lot of these things will have substantial changes on higher education. So it's something that, don't let it scare you, but think about it. Think about maybe expanding your list to more schools, thinking about, more safety schools? What is your best fit? Utilizing those aspects of demonstrated interest, because those are going to be the pieces that set you apart in applications when you can't visit colleges. For Syracuse in particular, we saw a huge growth in our personal interviews. On a normal year, we have about 7,000 students interview, and that's both in person and virtual. This year, because we were only able to offer virtual, we offered about 15,000 interviews to students. So that is a huge increase and is definitely part of our puzzle for this year. And I can tell you it'll probably be the same for next year. So feel free to ask questions of your admissions reps of those colleges, because things are going to be on a consistent changing basis.
Great, thank you guys. So these are two just kind of rapid fire questions. So, it seems like, because someone had asked, are you going to be test optional in the following year? Is there, I think David, you had said possibly you're not sure yet, but, is there anyone that knows that they will require testing next year? That's no from everybody? Okay. And another question kind of about next year is, I got a good question that was for next year. Do you anticipate as of now being in person for classes in the fall, mixed, hybrid, not sure right now? So, yep. So David, you could kick us off.
Currently, we're 29% in person, everyone in the class, 25% hybrid, and 40% all online. Our planning for next fall is to go back to what would look like a normal semester. That is a plan. That's how I would characterize that. We are planning for that. That means we're putting a fall schedule in place that will allow that to happen. We, however, will make the determination in June about what the social distancing mandates are or guidelines, and we will adhere to those. So if the social distancing guidelines go back to 0, we can do all of the other protection, the testing and the face masks and everything else. But if the social distancing guidelines stay at 6 feet, then we will end up with some sort of semester that looks similar to the current one.
Yeah, very similar to David. I don't know the exact percentages of what classes are remote and what classes are in person, but I do know as of right now, more classes are in person than they are remote. I think with 4,000, it's a somewhat manageable population where we have some students that are quarantining, but at the same time, it's largely a big effort on campus to have as many in-person classes as possible right now. So very much like David said, our plan for the fall semester is that everything will be happening in person. I think that we have learned a lot as a campus community from both the fall semester and this current semester to ensure that everyone is staying safe. We've upgraded every classroom so that if students need to attend remotely, then that's available to them. But yeah, as of right now, things are pretty good on campus, and we hope that things continue to get better so that we are a little bit more normal than what we are right now for the fall.
Yeah, we're nearly completely in person with some exceptions for larger classes and larger lectures. There's probably the vast majority of our students are only in one virtual class right now. We have the benefit of being kind of in the middle of nowhere, so we're really isolated on our area. So everybody has come to campus and not left campus and has been able to isolate. So thankfully, we've been able to be in person and plan to continue to do so next year.
So Stevens is interesting. If you are following the state of New Jersey guidelines, they change often. So we are at the mercy of the state of New Jersey when it comes to following suit with regards to indoor classroom spaces, indoor capacities, things of that nature. So just to give you a picture of what we've been able to do so far, this past fall, we did have so all of our classes, regardless of what year you are offered in a hybrid model. So if you are in the fall, if you were a first year student, you had the option of being on campus and learning in the classroom or being hybrid, and everybody else was remote. That went so well that in the spring, this month, we welcomed back our seniors to campus. So we had our freshmen and our seniors with the options of being on campus or remote, and the sophomores and juniors being fully remote. Again, similar, the plan and what we are planning for is to be as back to normal as possible in September or in late August. But we are at the mercy of the state of New Jersey and what the governor's regulations are. So everything, you know, you have to plan for both scenarios. And we are in constant communication with all of our students to make sure that everybody has the best experience possible. One thing to note that we did implement is that if you are on campus, whether you are administration, faculty, or student, if you are on campus, you have to get tested once a week, and your testing is available on campus. So we provide all of the campus testing for all of our students who are on campus in order to provide the safest environment possible.
So Syracuse has been in person both in the fall and the spring at this stage. We invited all students back to campus if they wanted to. So this past, I should say, summer, we spoke to students, really worked across campus of making the safest options possible, and then gave students the option over the summer of deciding if they wanted to come back to campus or if they wanted to do completely virtual learning. If a student decided to do completely virtual learning, they no longer paid room and board because they weren't on campus, whereas students who came to campus did pay that room and board. And then once on campus, students did actually have the choice. They could live on campus but still be completely virtual, because every single one of our courses do have virtual options. I would say most students, I don't know an exact percentage, do have more of a hybrid model because we allowed faculty to decide if they wanted to teach in person or not. And so some faculty, based on their own health and their own concerns, did decide to do an online model. So even if you were on campus, you might still be taking a couple online courses. With that being said, we've really had the same success this spring overall. Part of that success has been that we are pretty tough on our students of a no tolerance policy with masks in terms of gathering, very similar to what Jackie was saying with New Jersey. New York has some very, very strict guidelines, especially when it comes to colleges. In New York State, doesn't matter what size college you are, if you have a certain percentage of students that has COVID in a 1-week policy, you are officially closed for at least 2 weeks. For Syracuse University, that is 100 students out of 15,000. So that is, you know, it can happen very quickly if students aren't careful. That is all to say, our real big hope is that following the summer into the fall, we will be able to have a much larger semblance of realism on campus, have a much stronger student experience. We've put a lot of money, I will say, into making our campus as safe as possible. We can completely transform the Dome into a rapid antigen testing center, not only for our students that must have it at least once a week, that's undergrad, grad, faculty, staff, but also all their families. So we're really making sure that this is also a community-wide effort. Outside of that, we've added new buildings, expanded spaces, added cleaning options. And so all of this is to say that we're really trying to make sure that our students can have that feeling of a semester, you know, whether you're a first year, sophomore, junior, senior, that you have that chance to have more of that collegiate experience as much as possible. But I think you can tell from every single one of our answers is that we can describe what's happening right now, but we cannot predict the future in terms of COVID, because it is just so rapidly changing. All of our states are different. All of the public health lines are different. So I would just say, if you are interested in our colleges or any colleges, make sure you are on their mailing list, because I guarantee you they will email you about COVID changes, whether it's on campus tours, going SAT, ACT optional, or I guarantee that their website has a COVID page if you're very curious to see what they're doing. So do a little bit of your own homework, your own research, if that's something that is a really big concern for you.
Great. Thanks, guys. I love specific questions from our students. So, Jackie, this is right in your wheelhouse. If I want to pursue a computer science oriented major, how much do my senior year electives play a part in the admissions process if they're not STEM related, just for Stevens?
Sure. So let me start from the beginning. Your high school transcript is the most important piece of the application process. So making sure that you are taking those really strong academic courses. For Stevens, if you're interested in computer science, you do have to have taken or be in the process of taking calculus, and you do have to have taken or be in the process of taking biology, chemistry, and physics. Those are requirements. If you're missing one of those, that's okay. We will, it's possible that you can be admitted without one of those under the condition that you would take it prior to your entrance into Stevens in the fall. And that's strictly from an academic preparedness perspective. The first thing that we want to do is make sure that you are academically prepared for success. And that's across the board at every institution. The first thing we want to make sure of is that you are going to be academically successful, regardless of where you attend. Now, with regards to electives, do they have to be computer science based? No. We want you to be taking things that you're interested in. If it happens to be computer science, if your high school offers different computer science programs, which I know you guys do, that's certainly helpful for us to get a better understanding as to your sort of interest in that type of a program, in that type of a major. Does it have to be computer science related? It does not. So I hope that answers your question. But again, really those core academics are what we are looking for, even in continuation into your senior year. And your senior year grades do matter just as much as your freshman and sophomore and junior year grades.
Great, thanks. All right, David made a great suggestion because he didn't always want to be kicking off and he wanted everyone to kind of go back. So we'll flip the order a little bit. We'll go from the alphabet, the end of the alphabet back. Good question. Do any of the schools any of your schools offer a pre-law program? I think you guys can splice out whether it's accelerated or not. And how many students go on to law school? So I guess, Jessica, we'll kick off with you, right?
All right, sounds great. So we do offer a pre-law program here at Syracuse. You can actually major in absolutely anything and add it on. For anybody who is looking at law, know that political science does tend to be one of the most popular undergraduate majors in combination with a pre-law program, but you can literally go into absolutely anything. We've had students who have done our drama major and a pre-law program because one, they loved drama, but two, they wanted to be kind of a criminal lawyer arguing cases and felt like it would allow them to have that kind of background of almost acting to the jury and the judge, right? Interesting idea, but it worked. And that student who was a tour guide of ours went on to law school. So know that you can really dial down into what you're passionate about and add that pre-law advising program onto it. So with our program, it'll be shadowing experiences, connecting to a specific advisor that have connected students in law areas. We generally have between 10 and 15 students on a yearly basis interning in the DA's office here in Syracuse, as well as some other areas across Syracuse, New York. Syracuse does have our own law schools. If you did not hear this, our president is actually an alum of Syracuse Law, so that's kind of fun for us now. But it is just right on campus, so not only could you continue on to Syracuse Law following your time at Syracuse, our only program that has an accelerated 3+3, so 3 years undergrad, 3 years for law, would be through Whitman, which is our business school. Outside of that, it's going to be your traditional 4-year undergraduate experience. But other than just continuing on to Syracuse Law, a lot of our students actually go to the lectures that are housed there. Some students are actually able to shadow classes their senior year to get a little bit of a feeling. I think that's a really awesome insight into, is this the area I want to continue on to? You get practice LSAT opportunities, which is wonderful. It also, in my opinion, has one of the best cafes on campus. So that's always a nice little addition. But overall, when we're thinking of our pre-law students, 80% of them are getting into law school following their time. I'm not sure what the exact number is, but I know of those students who graduate from that pre-law advising track, about 80 to 85% of them are getting into their law school that first try.
Thanks, Jess. All right, Jackie. We'll skip Jackie and we'll come back to her. All right, who's next? I forgot.
I think she was trying to unmute. I think I was in the middle. So
I got it. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
go
I
ahead,
lost
Jackie.
my Zoom for a second. I like clicked on, I don't know. Sorry.
You're good, Jackie. You're good. All right.
So Stevens does offer both a pre-law track as well as a accelerated pre-law program. Our accelerated pre-law program does have a separate admission process. And so there are separate deadlines and separate requirements. And you do have to select a major within the College of Arts and Letters if you are going to be going through our accelerated pre-law program. And our accelerated pre-law program has certain SAT requirements. So even though we are SAT optional, if you are applying to accelerated pre-law, you do have to submit test scores for us. Otherwise, we do have a pre-law track where you can major similarly to Syracuse in anything that you would like and just work with a pre-law advisor in order to gain admission into law school. We've had students go on to Rutgers, Fordham, New York law, things of that nature. And coming out of Stevens, patent law tends to be quite a popular track.
Great.
Awesome. I'll hop in. So we do not have any accelerated programs in law, but we do have a 93% placement rate into law schools after graduation. So still really successful. And that includes Notre Dame's law school. We have a law school on campus and it's really beautiful. Similar to Jessica, it's one of the prettiest places to go for a cafe, to stay at the cafe and study. It's a little bit more exclusive. The undergrads aren't supposed to be in there, but often we'll sneak in there because it's a great place to study. So Notre Dame law is a great path, but it's definitely not the most popular or the only path for our students who are thinking about a law school path. And similarly to what everybody's saying, you can major in anything and everything at Notre Dame. You don't have to be in a specific program of study. And my personal advice to students is always to study what you're most interested in, because you may end up going to law school and that's great. And the best way to set yourself up for that is to do well in your classes. And it's hard to do well in classes you don't like, but you also might not stay pre-law and you might decide to do something else. And it's really important to figure out what you're passionate about and pursue that, because that'll help you whether or not you're pre-law. That's my personal advice for everybody, but you can study anything at Notre Dame and go on to that pre-law path with advising resources as well as career prep.
So Providence does not have a law school, nor do we have an accelerated program with law school, but there is, similar to my colleagues, a pre-law advisory track. I have to chuckle because my wife is downstairs teaching a law class right now on Zoom. She does appellate law. She was an English and government major, so just, you know, if you want to be an attorney, you can do that and become an attorney. But yeah, I think echoing a lot of my colleagues, you can really major in anything you want. I know a lot of our pre-law advisors recommend students take a couple philosophy courses, so you can get used to reading really dense and complex texts, because the things that you're going to encounter in law school, not like your normal English literature classes at Seton Hall Prep or in college. So it's a little bit different, but yeah, that's the story at PC.
Clemson does have pre-law, criminal justice. We do not have a law school at the university, but the matriculation rate to law school at the university is 88%.
Great, thanks, guys. We have a good question, actually a good segue. I'm going to ask this question, and then I'm also going to say to the parents and students on here, you kind of have the experts that are going to decide, you know, who gets in and who gets out. So if I could lightly steer it towards that on parts of the application process, I think that would be some good juicy stuff for you to hear. So a student asked, and this is just Emily for you, what experiences and or extracurriculars stand out in your application process for Notre Dame?
Yeah, and I think that in addition to the things that we'll all say about, you know, leadership roles and commitment over time and really being a part of communities, not just studying all the time, that's really important, but not the only thing that you're doing. I would say specific to Notre Dame, we're looking for students who are really wanting to make an impact in the communities that they're a part of. And that sounds like service. It can be community service. And certainly many of our students do community service before graduating at Notre Dame and before applying to Notre Dame. But it could be a research project that you've done that is something you've identified in your community. It could be something more service oriented. It could be creating a program to create a more inclusive environment or culture. It's anything and everything that you're doing to impact your community in a positive way. And one of the ways that we always talk about Notre Dame, we say we're a positive force for good in the world, and we care deeply about being that type of force. And we're looking for students who want to be a part of that kind of community and that mission. So I would say anything in those types of things. It doesn't have to be a specific type of, it doesn't have to be service. It's not like we're counting your service hours. It doesn't have to be a specific item, but something that's doing something good in your community.
Great. Thanks, Emily. I love this question. Okay, now we're getting into some good stuff. Can you please discuss which components of a student's application are most important at your school, and also provide any suggestions for how a student can stand out during the application process? Thank you. You know who you are. All right, let's go for it. Who are we starting with? I forget. Oh, Jess, it starts with you.
All right, awesome. The first thing that I will say is that everything in the application is important. Now, of course, there are some things that an admissions committee will look a little bit more closely at than others, but we ask you for all these pieces because they show us a whole picture of who you are as an applicant. If we didn't care about all the things, then we wouldn't ask you to do them, because we're reading tens of thousands of applications, and it honestly takes us longer when we ask you more things. We really do want to get a sense of who you are. And so that really hits to the point that what you can do to stand out is be authentically you. At this stage, you as a student do not have a lot of control over your application. And I don't say that to scare you, but at this stage, there's not a lot of things that you can do to change what your transcript is going to show us. Obviously, finish strong your junior year, continue strong into senior year, challenge yourself, but you can't go back and change, what has already happened. Your extracurriculars, you might find something new and that you're passionate about, or maybe continue on into a leadership role, this semester or continuing into next year. But again, you can't change what the past is. You can create great relationships with teachers and your counselors so those recommendations stand out, but you're not the ones writing them. So I say all of that. So when you go into your common application and you write that essay, go on to a short answer, whether it's optional or not, I'll just let you know it's not optional, you want to do it. And when you really talk to us in terms of that demonstrated interest aspect of why you like our institutions, if we track that, those are the things that stand out to us because they are what put a marker on who you are. And so again, I'll say, be authentically you. When I read an essay and it is so overly thesaurist that you decided to talk like somebody who is from 80 years ago, right? I know that's not you. And that doesn't mean that I want you to write your essay like you talk to your friend, right? It's still a piece of writing that grammar-wise we're going to look at in terms of that. The prose, we're going to really be looking through it, not necessarily with a fine-tooth comb, but to make sure that you can be successful at our institutions. But we want to see who you are. And in those writing pieces, the personal interviews, the demonstrated interest, you're able to set yourself apart from other students of telling us why you would be a great addition to our campus, because that's really what the application is about. It's not just about saying this is the great academic student I am or the great athlete I am. It's what are you going to do as a whole on our campus and in our community, because every single one of the colleges here are residential campuses. So that is something that we look at, that you're not only going to be a great person, but you're also going to be a great classmate, a great friend, a great alumni later down the line, right? And so those are the ways that you have the most, I would say, overview of that application process. So just think about that. I know I didn't really answer your question. I gave you a lot of things to think about, and I think that harkens to the fact that there's really not a perfect answer to this overall, but I do really appreciate the question.
All right, Jackie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much to add. That was a great response, Jessica. But I would encourage you to think about if you are applying to certain schools or certain programs, there might be, as I mentioned earlier, some course requirements that you need to think about and fulfill. So if you are a junior right now, and you, like I mentioned earlier, you haven't taken calculus yet, but you're thinking about taking applying to the computer science program at Stevens, you may want to think about taking calculus next year. So as you're sort of researching your different schools and different majors and different programs, I would just do a double check to make sure that the programs that you're applying to, what those course requirements are, if there are any. So that's just something to think about as you're moving forward in that process. And as I mentioned earlier, the reason for those course requirements is so that you are academically prepared for the different programs that you're applying to at the different institutions. It's not to make things harder for you, it's to ensure your success, because like we said, we want you to be academically successful first and foremost. And with being test optional, the transcript is playing a little bit more weight in a lot of our admissions processes, definitely at Stevens. Where in the past we've always considered test scores. This year, because they're optional, we're paying a lot more attention to those grades, coursework that you're taking. The rigor of your curriculum is something that we're paying very close attention to as well. All of the other things make up the personal side of the application. So your essay, your letters of recommendation, your extracurricular activities, again, all of those pieces are exceptionally important, especially as we are moving into that test optional realm for this year.
Echoing everything that everyone said, pretty much everything I was going to say has been mentioned. But one thing I would mention is that it's really important to challenge yourself in the curriculum that's available. So taking AP classes is great, taking honors classes is great, but don't just take a lot of classes in those areas if you're applying for a liberal arts university and you're only taking rigor in one subject. If we see a student who's taken 10 APs and they've been only in math and science, then we're going to wonder why you didn't take rigor across the breadth of your curriculum. So I think that's something you have a lot of control over right now before senior year, and really having control over your schedule. And that's something to consider if you are looking at liberal arts universities, that you may come in with an intended major, but at Notre Dame you actually don't declare your major until sophomore year. So we really want to see that you're prepared for any major that you might end up in. So that's a plug, I guess, more for Notre Dame specifically, or liberal arts universities. That may not be true everywhere, but it's something to consider.
Wow, I really don't know, what else to say at this point. I think that, we appreciate well-rounded students, as Jessica mentioned and Jackie mentioned as well. Students that are doing well both inside the classroom, outside the classroom, and that we feel are good additions to our campus community. I think those are things that we look for in the application process and when we do reads of files. And I think the relationship that we have with Ben and Tom certainly helps, for students that might end up on the fringe or the borderlines. I know I can just call Ben and say, like, tell me about the student, not even discussing what's in the application, but just tell me about the student and how they are in the prep community. And that's a good resource for us as well. So if you haven't stopped by Ben's office, go say hi to Ben.
I don't have too much to add. I think that was well done. So here's what I would say. We talked a bit about demonstrated interest earlier, and I think it connects to this question. And not every place considers demonstrated interest. You heard, I think, from Stevens how they use it very specifically, and that was a good detailed answer. At a place like Clemson, for instance, we do not use demonstrated interest until it comes down to waitlist decisions. And that is a place where demonstrated interest can really matter. So we would answer the question, do we use demonstrated interest in our decision making? We would say no, but that's not quite entirely true, because when we get to the wait list, it can matter who we might select off of or not.
Oh, I think that's a great, just a quick plug, because I'm desperately trying not to speak too much, but I can say I have been on the phone, through email, literally, and Tom as well, on certain cases with everyone on this panel. That has been, and sometimes as David, it says, maybe it's a waitlist situation. Maybe for some it's an early decision one or early action, however they process it, we respect whatever that is. And we know when to, kind of be like, it will be what it'll be, and then kind of get involved. But I can say that is, certainly a piece of it. If you guys could just, kind of, if you do track demonstrated interest right now, could you just give a thumbs up? And if you don't, just give a thumbs down. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to move on. We have hold on. For schools that have an industrial design program, can you please elaborate on the requirements for admission? So if you don't have one, you could say just we don't. And if you do, go for it.
I'll jump. We don't have an industrial design program.
So
Steve,
okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Syracuse does have an industrial design program. We actually have a very strong program. It's out of our College of Visual Performing Arts. So it is considered an artistically based program. So with our industrial design program, it's in the School of Design. You do have to apply in with a portfolio. That is I would say probably the most important piece of your application, because again, it is based on that artistic talent. Obviously, we still need strong students that can be successful in some of the curriculum that is outside of just those design classes. But really, we're looking for creative students within that. We do pre-portfolio reviews for that as well. So a plug for them. If you want to start working on that, you can go to them even virtually to go through any portfolios. But the really unique thing with our industrial design program is it is a 5-year program. So it is 4 year, it's pretty much just a +1, right? So 4 years for your undergrad, and then you add 1 extra year for that master's in industrial design. I believe the last ranking we had was in the top 10 in the country.
Sure. So at Stevens, we don't have industrial design, but we do offer industrial and systems engineering. So a little bit of a different take on industrial design with an engineering perspective to it. You would graduate with a bachelor's of engineering degree in industrial and systems engineering. So certainly a little bit different, but something worth looking into if you're thinking about going a little bit broader, a little bit more big picture rather than just industrial design.
Yeah, so we have an industrial design concentration within the design major, which is within the art and art history department, but that is more of a smaller program and it's a 4-year degree. So one thing I would plug, kind of broadening out this question, but we do allow students to submit portfolios for architecture, music, and art. I had to think of the third one, but not for industrial design. So those are reviewed for those 3 majors and for students who choose to submit music portfolios, even if they're not a music intent. So those are the only ones that we would review from our faculty, and they would provide feedback for us. But there are no specific requirements for us for industrial design. And for all of our students, it's still just an intended major for Notre Dame because you don't declare a major yet. So other than suggested calculus classes and physics classes for some STEM majors, there are no differences in the requirements across the colleges.
Pretty easy answer for me because we do not have industrial design. So there you go.
Right. Well, I'm going to take one of the questions and I'm going to kind of rework it. The question was, for engineering majors, are there any other parts of the application that you focus on, especially if test optional? I'm going to rework that and just ask you, if you have engineering, how do you read them differently? And I guess, David, I'll start with you.
Ben, could you say that again, please?
So I'm going to reword this question of basically, do you read engineers differently or engineering hopefuls? And if so, how?
So yes, the easiest way to think about academic programs within the admissions process at Clemson is to divide majors into science and non-science. There are very specific majors where we're looking for very specific things. Those are handfuls of majors though. But with engineers, we're paying much more attention to math and the science courses that you've taken during high school. The math portion of tests, when we have a student that's using and asking us to use the test, that is also a bigger factor. There was a question in the chat earlier that I responded to specifically about this. While the math courses and science courses play a bigger role in how we consider engineers, we actually don't require calculus for admission into engineering.
So fairly similar to that, we're kind of in the in-between spot where we have a pre-engineering program because being a true liberal arts college, the mindset on our campus is that if you're combining all you need to do to be a successful engineer and all you need to do to be a successful liberal arts graduate, that it's really tough to fit that into 4 years and still get a well-rounded experience. So it's a 3+2 program in partnership with both Washington University in St. Louis and Columbia University in New York. But when students are applying into that program, very similar to what David mentioned, there's no specific requirements for students, but yeah, I think we're looking at your math and science courses to see what those classes are and how well you've done in those classes. So yeah, there have been students accepted as pre-engineering majors that have gotten to pre-calculus and do not have calculus. I think it's really rare for a student to have not taken pre-calc and been invited as a pre-engineering major. But I think that we are looking at math and science grades, but again, at the same time, there's no specific requirement other than really just pre-calc. So that's basically it.
Yeah, so for engineers at Notre Dame, we do require physics and advanced math, which could be pre-calculus or calculus. I think echoing the sentiment of it's very, very rare for our engineering students not to have calculus. And that is something that even if you don't have it and you're admitted, it's probably best that you at least open a book over the summer because you're going to be behind starting calculus at Notre Dame. So definitely really encouraging calculus and physics as well. And if you are admitted to Notre Dame without having taken physics and you're intending to major in the College of Engineering, you would actually be required to do a physics course over the summer as a part of your preparation. And that's really just for your own benefit of preparing for the first year at Notre Dame. So that's true for some of our programs, and that would include a few of our science majors, all of our engineers, and architecture as well.
So I've already talked a little bit about what we're looking for with our engineering students. We are known for our programs in engineering. Stevens offers a Bachelor's of Engineering degree, which is sort of unique in that we don't offer a Bachelor of Science in Engineering. And just very quickly, what that means is that all of our engineering students start off in a core engineering and core hands-on design curriculum. And then typically in the middle of your sophomore year, you actually break off into your majors. So this graduates our students as well-rounded engineers with a focus, not just a mechanical engineer or a computer engineer or a naval engineer. We believe in the well-rounded engineer, and our students are very, very successful in the job market with this type of a program and this type of a degree. We currently offer 12 different programs in engineering, ranging from mechanical engineering, our most popular and our most broad, all the way to optical engineering and industrial and systems engineering, which are our two newest programs. I've already mentioned the requirements. Do we read our engineering students differently? Majority of our applications are engineers. You can apply as a mechanical engineer or as a civil engineer, et cetera, or you can apply as an undecided engineer as well. So you don't have to know exactly what type of engineering it is that you want to go into. You can absolutely apply to Stevens as an undecided engineer, and that's totally fine as well.
All right. Oh, sorry, Jess, go for it.
That's okay. For College of Engineering and Computer Science here at Syracuse, very similar to my colleagues here. With us in particular, we must see chemistry and we must see pre-calculus. Outside of that, I would say over 90% of the students who do get admitted into the program have both physics and calculus. But we understand that that can sometimes be an equity barrier for many students who might have started out their freshman year not taking a specific class, and then it allows them not to take a certain class senior year. Or there's some underfunded schools that don't have those courses offered. And so we do only require, again, pre-calculus and chemistry. That is just not something that we can discuss past that. But again, over 90% are going to have that calculus and physics. And I would say, I would actually echo what Emily said, is at Syracuse, we really do encourage students to crack open a book or possibly take a community college class in physics and calculus if you haven't. I can say for Syracuse, our largest tutoring class, or I guess the class that is most requested for tutors is Calculus 101. And so we really tell students, if you don't have a background in it, if you've never taken a class in it, you want to have some idea coming into your first year if you can.
Great, Jess, we'll keep it with you with this juicy question, which I can't wait to hear the answers for. I guess it's a two-parter. Is there a cap on how many New Jersey students that you admit? And is there a cap on how many Seton Hall prep students you admit, which you can just basically hit end session if you say yes. So no. But all right, Jess, we'll start with you. New Jersey and Seton Hall prep.
This is a great question. I would say almost every single panel I have ever been on, this is a question that is asked, whether it's in New Jersey or California or Tennessee, because those are the other areas that I do. And I love answering the question, no and no. No, we do not have a cap on how many students we get from a specific state. And no, we do not have a cap on how many students that we have from a specific school. Ultimately at Syracuse, and I'm just going to speak for my other colleagues here because I can probably guarantee what they're going to say is going to be a similar vein, is that we do not have a cap on schools or states because we want the best students possible. If that means at Seton Hall Prep, there are 10 amazing students, we're going to admit all 10 amazing students, right? If all 10 of them come to us, awesome. But you know, that might not happen, right? We are trying to admit the best class possible, and then from that admit, yield the best class possible. Now, I will step back and say, as an institution, Syracuse does have a mission of having a diverse institution. Part of that diversity is geographic diversity. And so within that, New Jersey is our second largest state after New York. And so while I say we won't have a cap on New Jersey students, we do get quite a bit of applications from New Jersey students. And so that does have a vein of when we're reading, right? Whereas we might get only 100 applications from Kansas. And so there is going to be what is called institutional priorities. Unfortunately, it's something that you have absolutely no control over. But there are institutional priorities, and generally one of them is to be a geographically diverse institution. So that is something that you should know about, but one, you don't have any control over it. And two, again, as long as you are an excellent student doing the best that you can possibly do, we're going to want to bring you to our institution. Doesn't matter where you're from.
Right, Jess?
Yeah, I mean, same. That was the perfect answer. The answer for Stevens is no and no, but keeping institutional priorities in mind. Being a school that is located in New Jersey, majority of our applicant pool is from New Jersey, and I can't have an entire freshman class of all New Jersey students. So that being said, is there a cap? No, absolutely not. We definitely want all of the best students that we can possibly have, but keeping those institutional priorities in mind as we're making some decisions.
Yeah, Notre Dame's in northern Indiana, so we're a bit further away, but we still have a lot of students from New Jersey, and probably my colleagues want to put a cap on me for New Jersey, but there's no state cap. I would echo everything that we've talked about so far. I could admit every student in a school, I could admit 0, I could admit very different numbers from one year to the next. It has nothing to do with how many students we've admitted at your school. It's just about the application that you present.
Yeah, I think this. I think when I was on a panel with David earlier in the spring, he gave kind of this answer. So sorry, David, I'm going to steal your response because I liked it so much. But it cuts both ways, right? About how Jess mentioned, if we could have X number of applicants from Seton Hall Prep that we think are great fits to Providence College, we'll take all of them. Likewise, if we have 20 apps from Seton Hall Prep and we feel that none of them are great fits to Providence College, then we won't take any of them. So it does cut both ways, but like Jess mentioned, it's no and no. And sorry, David, if I completely stole your answer, but it was a good one. I liked it.
I am sure I was not at Seton Hall Prep when I gave that answer, because I want to start with, I go out of my way to make sure I admit every Seton Hall Prep applicant. That is always my goal. The detail I would give about residency and mix at Clemson as a land grant public institution, even though we are highly selective and competitive, we do keep we have a goal of keeping the in-state, out-of-state mix at 60-40. So it is a little bit more difficult to be admitted from out of state. The top 4 states for Clemson: South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, and New Jersey's 4th.
So, David, we're going to actually keep it with you and work your way back. This is a good question from a student. With schools being test optional, is having a good standardized test score more or less helpful for the applicant compared to prior years? So think of it, I think that what the student is saying is maybe having a test score that's in your top 25th percentile.
So I'm not 100% sure I understand that question perfectly, but I'm going to take a stab.
Go for it.
When we are test optional, and this is our first year, we are doing everything we can do in the application review process to not pay attention to any. So we have test scores from people who said they want to be test optional. They send them, they get them, and they decide, we don't want you to use them in the evaluation. We very actively train our folks to not pay attention to those test scores when we're doing it. It's hard to say how this will really impact the overall class, because it's the first year that we've evaluated both students with test scores and students without. It is not making it any easier. Ironically, and maybe counterintuitively, a student who is test optional, it actually gets a little bit of a closer look at the high school transcript and the grades and the curriculum and the rigor. So it doesn't make it harder, but it doesn't automatically make it easier. And my one concern about being test optional, the biggest concern that I have, there are real benefits. There are real good reasons to make that one of our policies. But I do worry that students and families sometimes consider being test optional as somehow an easier way to be admitted. And we're doing everything we can do to treat applicants in either situation. The last thing I would say, and I think it's true for all of us, we are trying to get to yes. We are not looking for reasons to say no. We are really looking at the application and trying to get to yes.
I like that positive outlook on things. That makes me feel a lot better about everything that I do when I read files. So that's good. And it's totally true. We're looking at reasons to bring you to campus. PC has been a test optional school for, I think it's 16 years now. So this is a practice that we are very much used to. And so this is a pretty common question when a student that has a really good score, or they go on our website and they see where our middle 50% range is for scores, and knowing that they have a score above that, they ask this question because they think the answer is yes, and that we will fawn over these high test scores. I think test scores for us rarely move the needle in terms of an admission decision. The reasoning for that is because in our studies, your test score is not the best indicator of your academic success once you arrive on campus. And so test scores are really helpful for schools when we're trying to like boost our rankings and to appear more prestigious sometimes than I might actually be. But the thinking in our office, at least our philosophical viewpoint, is that your test score is not the best indicator of how well you'll do once you're a freshman on our campus. And so I think that, like I said, a test score is really, it's very rarely does it ever move the needle. A lot of things have to happen. Like you still have to be a really good student and have taken a rigorous curriculum for you to be even considered. And then a test score is just not ever a huge factor for us. So that hopefully that helps out.
I'm going to answer this specifically for your school because I think that's all you really care about. And the thing that's really, really important that I think all of us will say is that the transcript, I actually think this was already said, the transcript is the most important part. And we know a lot about your school and where you fall in the class and how students have done historically over time. And that is the number one thing that we're looking for in the academic review is how rigorous your schedule is and how you've done in your classes. So GPA and rigor are very important. GPA is not a tell-all number. We look at the trends over time. If you've done worse over time, then we'll wonder, as you've picked up in rigor, why you've gone down in performance. But if you've picked up rigor and you've done better over time, that's going to be really good, and that's going to show us your growth. So again, GPA is not by itself the most important thing, but the transcript is key, and I think everybody would say the same thing. So really, really important. You may have a really good test that you're proud of, and you've probably worked really hard for that test. We know how hard it's been to even take those tests. So if you feel proud of that score, then certainly share that with us. But the transcript is going to be the number one most important thing.
Yeah, I certainly echo all of my colleagues. I think that if you're deciding on whether or not to submit test scores to a test optional institution, what we've been saying, again, this is our first year test optional. We're not sure if we're going to be test optional in the future or not. But what we have been letting our students know is first and foremost, again, as mentioned, to sort of look at that middle 50% of where our test scores fall. If you're in the higher range of those, it might be in your best interest to submit your scores. But again, that's certainly not a guarantee of admission. A lot of other things come into play, as we've talked about. If you feel that your test score is an accurate representation of you and your ability and your academic ability, and you're proud of them, then I think you submit them. If you don't feel it's an accurate representation of you and your academic ability, or if you've had struggles this past year or in the future, whatever the case may be, then don't submit them. There are a lot of schools out there that are test optional. One, of course, on this panel who's permanently test optional. There are a lot of schools that are permanently test optional. Certainly a ton of options for you if you don't feel that your testing represents your abilities as a student.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach to this because I loved when we were answering earlier this cuts both ways idea. So David, now you cannot be on a panel with either myself or Matt because we're just stealing everything from you. But I'll apply it in this as well. A standardized test cuts both ways. It can help you. I will be honest, there are students that it will help, right? If you are borderline and you send in a great score, why would that hurt you, right? And so it can, for Syracuse at least, it can put you in the positive. But at the same time, and we have seen this for our first year being test optional time and time again, students sending in extremely weak scores as being a test optional school. And I'm not necessarily sure why students are doing it. I think part of it has to do with the fact that you've worked really hard on it. You somehow got a test and you're really proud that you got that test, and most people did not. but a bad score is still a bad score. And I don't mean this to sound harsh, because I know this can sound a little bit harsh, but in my opinion, I am going to kind of deviate a little bit from what Jackie said, is if you feel like you have a score that accurately represents you, but it is not at or above the average, or at least the median 50% for a college, you should still not send it in, because it is going to detract from the rest of your application. And we know that standardized, and this has already been said, we know standardized scores are biased. We know that standardized scores have a lot of difficulty. If you're a strong test taker, you're probably going to be really good at this. If you are great at discussions and stink at tests, probably not that great, and your transcript's going to be a lot better, right? And so you really need to think critically about different schools and colleges, because everybody has different medians. Have a conversation with your admissions representative. Not every college will tell you yes or no. At Syracuse, our policy is not to tell a student yes or no, but I will very blatantly say to student, well, this is our average. You are below our average, but that's completely up to you if you want to send it in. Kind of read between the lines there, right? And so know that you do need to think critically about that test. Yes, in some schools, it's going to have a positive, but know that, again, on that opposite end, it can bring down your overall admissions rate and possibility to a university. And so even if you've gotten that, prep teacher and you've taken the class and you've done everything, if it doesn't meet the standard for that university, you're only adding a negative pretty much to your application.
And Emily, just I'm going to jump in real quick, and then I'm going to let you round it out. But I can say, for Tom and I, just speaking from, the secondary school side, there's a school specific advisement, and then there's like a U specific advisement that we go by. How does it pair against your transcript? And we have great knowledge of what certain schools are looking at, the scope of schools, what they're looking at, not just for those scores, but based on where you are. So there's a lot of layers to it. There's no one size fits all. And I've never had more conversations, student to student. Well, where for this one you send, for these three, no. So it's not done in a silo. And Emily, you can wrap this one up.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and give a little bit of a different piece of advice that I don't think we talked about. And obviously it's going to depend on whether the schools you're applying for are test optional next year. But if you're applying to only test optional schools, please, please, please do not drive a far, far distance to take a test. The amount of times I've heard this year that students have driven over 2 hours to get to a test, and that's not going to be the best test you can get. You are exhausted, you're stressed out. It's also not worth your time, and it's very dangerous. So that's just my plea, because I've seen so many examples of that this year, where students have signed up for 5 tests and then they finally drive 3 hours away to take a test, and it's not the best work that they could have done. Please don't do that. That's just my last piece of advice, because if you're applying to test optional schools, yes, it may help you, but that is not the thing you should be focusing on. You should focus on what's in your control and what's the easiest thing for you to control, which is your grades, the activities you're a part of, and not driving 5 hours to get it to a test. So that's just my last piece of advice there.
I could not, echo that more. And I have had those discussions this year. So, in the interest of time, I will say again, if we did not, by chance, there were a couple that we missed. If I didn't get to them, I apologize, but I really want to just have our last thing, and then we'll wrap up. For each of you, Seton Hall Prep extremely well. We've all had conversations. You for all of you've either gotten through EA, priority, ED1, maybe ED2, and you've kind of gone through. So I just want you to really throw your kind of Seton Hall Prep lens on. And if you could give kind of just your best piece of advice for where they are right now in February and going into the application process next year, their best advice as a Seton Hall Prep student, moving forward, if you could. All right. And I guess we'll start with Jess, we'll start with you and work our way back to David.
Great. I will say 100%, and I can't remember who mentioned this earlier. I think it was Matt. Use Ben and Tom. I cannot tell you how many times I have had a conversation with Ben that he emailed me, called me up. A student in an admissions committee might have been a deny, a wait list. and he tells me something that was not in the application, talks about how strongly a student wants Syracuse University, tells me the type of student that they'll be at the university. Those are the things that can change a decision. Now, does it change every decision? No. So if you don't get into a school, don't go run to his office and say this is somehow his fault. I promise you it is not, but use your counseling staff. You are extremely, extremely privileged to have folks that are very concerned about you, care about your well-being, and take that extra step, because I can tell you, I have worked with many, many counselors in New Jersey, Tennessee, the Bay Area of California. I can say that Ben is probably one of 5 out of all the high schools that I've worked with that I can say I know 100% he's going to tell me exactly what I need to know, and that I know it is extremely truthful and extremely to the point. And so this is to say that Matt said it earlier, if you haven't been to, the counseling office and you haven't had to have a conversation with Ben yet, do it, because I can guarantee you he's going to be very honest with you of saying, this is a good school, this is not a good school, this is a good program, this is what you need to do it. They've done their research and they've worked with the college counselors like us to make sure that they've created those relationships for your benefit. So that is my number one thing I would say that you should do as a Seton Hall prep student.
So in addition to that, certainly echo utilizing your college counseling team. My advice is to, as you're having these conversations, to be honest with yourselves, be honest with your college counseling team, and be honest as a family. If this is, college is very much a family decision. It's really important for everyone to understand the wants and needs of the student, first and foremost, but then also the investment part of it, making sure that everyone is on the same page with regards to what the student wants, what the student needs when it comes to choosing a school to apply to, and then ultimately selecting the college to attend is so important. It's important from a financial standpoint. It's important from a fit standpoint. So just really something to think about, again, is just being honest with yourselves and having those very honest conversations, and having them now. It's not too early to start having those conversations, and really starting to think about, again, what are your wants and what are your needs when it comes to selecting schools to apply to and ultimately the ones to attend.
Yeah, and I'm going to expand on Jessica's answer, but in a really specific way. I think that there are a lot of things that you have to navigate in a normal college search, and even more so in this type of college search. So there's a lot of information that you're going to be looking up about universities. And I think one of the things that we're sorry about, as all of our universities, is that none of us have the same deadlines, none of us have the same early processes. It's not going to be the same for each university. I think Seton Hall Prep probably has one of my best of my schools that I work with understandings over, early action for us versus regular decision. I think your staff is going to be such a huge support for each part of the process, and whether that's requirements. A lot of students today have asked about specific requirements for different programs that you're applying for. If it's applying early versus regular, those are things that are a lot of things to keep in one, brain, in one spreadsheet, and really something that you should lean on your counselors if you have any questions about that, because that is something that is difficult to navigate, and they have a really good understanding of.
All excellent advice so far. I think I'm going to cheat and do 2 small ones because I like this question a lot. The first one is for students to start practicing taking ownership of this college application process. I think that we are always very impressed, and it tends to stand out easily to us when we're reading an application, when we can tell that a student has been really the one in charge of this whole process, whether that is reaching out to us themselves even before the application is submitted, or reaching out to us once the application is submitted. I think that those students are harder to ignore in the admission process. And so those self-advocating students really tend to stand out a little bit. And the other thing is that because we have a lot of people from Seton Hall Prep that apply and end up enrolling on our campus. I think that's a great resource for students. I always tell students or prospective high school students to connect with as many current college students as possible. I'm obviously going to give you kind of the rosy picture of Providence College, but when you talk to current PC students that are Seton Hall Prep alumni, they're going to be able to give you the best answers as to what it's like to be a student here. What are classes like? What is there to do outside of classes? And how their experience is. So not just at Providence's campus, but any school that you're looking at, check with Ben and see if there are other Seton Hall Prep alums that are at the school and make that connection. And they're going to be a great resource for you.
I would reinforce everything you've heard already from all of these colleagues. I have two very specific things I want to say. College admissions is not a game. It's not a puzzle to figure out. All of the things that you do in the rest of your life to be successful are the same things that are going to work in this process. Work hard, do your homework, communicate well, ask questions, listen. If you do all of those things, you will navigate your way through this really effectively. Again, it's not a game. We're not trying to create a puzzle that's really hard to solve. The last piece of advice I would give you, the second piece, is something that I stole from somebody. 3 years ago, I heard someone who I think most of you know on this panel, Stacy Kowalczyk from Penn State, say, it was the absolute, it brought a tear to my eye. I was actually like having to compose myself when I heard her say it. Be kind to each other is that advice. We are all in this together. So as a student or as a parent or as a school counselor or as someone at a college or university that you're dealing with or engaged with throughout this process, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to help students find the best path forward to be the most successful person they can be wherever it is they're going to choose. So in the middle of all of this stressful, anxious, anticipatory process, remember we're in it together and just be kind to each other. It helps a lot.
Great. Well, honestly, I can't thank you all enough. I think I speak for our entire community at Seton Hall Prep. I mean, I'll say before this panel, all of you have done a tremendous amount, and you're probably thinking of all those conversations, whether it was myself or anyone on our college placement staff, of what you've done. The other thing I always want to reiterate, just from doing this, for I think I bailed after like 7 cycles. I don't know, Jackie would probably know. She could rag on me about it, but so I just, the last thing I want to say is everyone on this panel does not need to do this. It's personal time. It's a snow day, or kind of a snow day, so I truly do. It'll never be lost on me. And I hope it's never lost on our community that they're doing this for, personal time. And to be honest, they said 4 words or more about their institutions, but a lot of this is really just to help our class of 2022. So I appreciate you guys very much. And I will, of course, record this. I'll do my best because now I edit video.